So the aim is just to ask a few questions around what really stands out to you both, and sort of really delve a little bit deeper into how to stand out from that crowd. So just for everybody that's just joined, firstly, thank you for joining. To give you a quick overview on who we have here, so we've got two fantastic guests. Susanna, currently the VP and Head of Sales at Serve, who are a global hospitality solutions business. Susie was also Group Managing Director and Sales Manager at Groupon as well. And Craig, Head of Sales and previously sort of VP of Sales at FinScan and currently at Cascade. So hopefully with all of our experiences, we can help out a little bit there. Hopefully that's a good overview of you both.
Absolutely. Well, no, lovely to meet everyone. I guess I also wanted to point out the fact that the wonderful Dane actually placed me in my role at Serve, so we go way back.
Been a few years, isn't it? And Craig, I know we've known each other for 4
or 5 years. Time is flying by, Dane. Flying by.
Time is flying by. I appreciate you both joining me because I know it's 5 o'clock in the evening. It's quite a busy time for you guys coming up to Christmas as well. So no, we're sure everybody really appreciates that. So, I mean, let's get straight into it. Obviously, we've all seen a lot of CVs. Craig, let's maybe start from yourself. When you get a CV in your inbox from a sales candidate, what's going to really stand out for you?
Well, thanks for starting with me, Dane.
Yeah, chucking right in the deep end.
Yeah. No, I guess it really comes back because as you know, you get lots of them to review. So you really want to focus down on the outcomes on the CV as opposed to just saying, well, this is what I've been doing, just telling a story. You want to see, how they've, if I approach it, put my salesman's hat on, percentages, how they've done to target, how they've done to quota, timelines, if they've delivered large projects in a good time and professional manner, savings, outcomes. That's the sort of thing that I drill down straight into, really. That's what I want to see. The history, the background. I don't want to go back and look at what they were doing 15 years ago. I want to see the stuff that was most relevant in the last 5-10 years. And again, that's underpinned by, well, what have they actually done in those last 5 or 10 years? Which goes back to my opening statement. I want to see the numbers that they've actually hit and achieved. That's a key thing for me. Get to the bottom line.
Fine. So when you say numbers, is that revenue? Is that what sort of numbers are you looking to look for?
Again, if I'm employing a sales guy, it is going to be revenue numbers, percentage to quota, percentage to target. If it's for maybe a professional services individual, I'll be looking at projects that they've delivered, how they've delivered them, have they been on time? It really depends what the individual I'm looking to employ or interviewing has been coming at. But if we use salespeople as the example, it's really going to be how have they done percentage-wise to their targets in the last 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, makes sense. What about yourself, Susie?
No, I agree. So, in terms of just a CV in general, I think keeping it concise is always a big thing for me. I don't love a 10-page CV. I want the information on there to be relevant, but I want it to be concise. So just making sure that whatever it is that is included on the CV is relevant to the role that you're applying for, try and align it and sculpt it within reason to match the job requirements. But I also agree with Craig that, statistics are a big thing for me, especially as a sales manager. And when I'm focused on sales, it's looking at that kind of quantifiable evidence that you've been successful in the role that you've got. I also like if you are able to name check a few big names or big projects that you've been working on and give a little bit of a background. And in addition to that, I really like when you can see from a CV some form of kind of demonstration of personal growth. I always find that that's quite an attention grabber. So showing where you started and then the kind of additional responsibilities, the training, the new skill sets that you developed to get you those quantifiable results that you're showing. So much the same, really.
Sorry, Craig, go on.
Can I just add one thing? Can people please proofread their CVs before they send them out? Glaring obvious misspellings and different formats on a CV. it still happens, and that's scary, really.
So I am a complete self-diagnosed. My team will all tell you I'm a complete pedant. And honestly, there is nothing more distracting than having typos, and they are a red flag. It just shows you've got a lack of attention to detail. You haven't proofread it, you haven't spell checked it, and they really do distract from, you might have the best experience in the field relevant to the role, but it just distracts in the same way that also with CVs, I am a big fan of keeping it kind of simple in terms of the layout, so like a clear and professional font. So I love, kind of a readable serif or serif, however you're meant to say it. Palatino, Georgia, Baskervilles, all very professional fonts, and they're obviously attention grabbing without being distracting. I don't like color in a CV. I don't like patterns in a CV. They take away from, the value of it. And I think the devil is really in the details. So paying attention to line, space, margin, font, spelling, all of that really just, makes a CV stand out.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. Just going back to when, as you mentioned, concise. So I have conversations with a number of go-to-market candidates.
Yes.
There's always this, how much is too much and how much is too little. So I had a conversation with somebody the other day that had 10 years experience or 15 years experience, but he still wanted to keep his CV to one page, which in my opinion, a bit too short. So do you have what's your thoughts on that?
So I think 2 pages is a maximum in my mind. And I think realistically, it should be concise in that it should showcase your hard and soft skills, and it should really show why you would be suitable for the role. But this is to then lead to an interview where you can go into extensive detail during that process. So this is more of a kind of, I think of a CV as like a kind of headline grab, point on the main bullet points, keep it concise, keep it to the point, and then you can elaborate on it when you meet people in person.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
If somebody has sort of 10 years experience, what's irrelevant? Obviously your targets are very relevant, you mentioned. What information do you think I'm not interested in seeing?
Is it 10 years at one company, Dane?
Let's say 10 years at 4 companies.
Yeah. Well, to me, Susie's got exact point. I think the last 2 companies that individual at, they're the ones they want to pad and have more explanation to. A CV is just a door opener. Again, what you want is that to be the hook, and then you can uncover and talk about the development you went through. You started as a internal sales director, then you became a sales manager. Then that's the way you want the CV to progress. So it's telling a story. But the last 2, the last 2 companies, as long as it's not the last 2 companies, it's only been 6 months. But the last 2 companies, that's where the picture should be written, or the story should be written.
Yeah.
From my perspective, that's what I'd focus on anyway. Going back past 10 years, just irrelevant. People develop and change, hopefully, over 10 years when they're working.
I agree. You want to tell that kind of compelling story through your CV, and in that it's giving some of the information, demonstrating the growth. But, if in the last 10 years you've been at 4 different companies, you can't go into detail as to every single thing you did, or at least I hope you can't, in 2 pages. So it is just, as Chris said, it's that door opener.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think with going back to targets, numbers, figures, I think that's super important as well. But even more important, the actual specifics. So, for example, I don't know, feel free to correct me if you think I'm wrong. For example, average deal sizes, is that important to both of you?
It isn't. It isn't. Because it really depends. Ultimately, if you're coming from enterprise sales, those figures are going to look a lot more impressive, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the job you were doing was impressive. If you are able to compare like from like, in terms of this was our MRR when I started in January, and I'd managed to get the average check size up and the MRR to X within 6 months. That to me is more important. It's showing that growth and improvement and just sales capability, really.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, totally. It's that will be the first thing I get if you're looking to employ an enterprise salesperson, individual. That will be one of your first hooks on the top. But as Susie said, they could have worked at a company and they could have sold 50,000 opportunities across 50 jurisdictions. Hey, guess what? That's an enterprise sale, but the volume's just lower. It takes someone to actually understand that and read what they're telling you.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a guy that sells 1.5 million, but he's made that up from doing 50 or 100 deals, hey, that's still an enterprise sales guy. Most people, not everyone, most people can be trained. So that's always something to bear in mind when you're looking at their history.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just going to share maybe an example template for everyone. I'm hoping that this will get both of your approvals because it's been in the game for some time. And I think it comes into perspective of what we've all been saying, right?
Dane, you're breaking up.
Oh, that's never ideal, is it? No, I was just saying, so I've just shared a CV template. So what it goes in perspective to what we were just saying. So I can send this to anybody afterwards if they want to see it. So a quick overview of achievements, and then prior to this, it's 2 pages. It's got your professional experience, a quick overview on the company. It's got, manage your portfolio, etc., etc. But it's very specific. And I think sort of then going into your yearly targets and your actuals, but again being quite specific. So if you was 110% over your target, what was your target, sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's okay. First quick glance at it.
Yeah, and I think just it incorporates what you was mentioning, Susie, as well. It's to the point. It's laid out in an easy way to read, because I'm sure if you're hiring an enterprise sales role, how many CVs do you think you'll get in your inbox? Be quite a few, right? Yeah. Perfect. So again, happy to share that. So once you've got your CV in front of a hiring manager, obviously it's interviews. There's a lot on the market at the moment on not getting feedback in interviews, not understanding how to do research around businesses. There's a lot of stigma around interviews and how the competition, etc. So it'd be good to understand from both of your point of views to help everybody out sort of what really stands out on an interview. When you've got that first stage interview, Craig, what's going to keep you engaged?
Well, you sort of led to it. Doing research on companies isn't difficult nowadays. Mm-hmm. It really isn't. If you can't spend 30 minutes, an hour, looking at the person that you're interviewing with, looking at their history, finding out where they've been, what their journey's been, and then looking at the company, even getting company financial records, depending which level you're going into that organization, it's not difficult. Everyone has got Google and other search engines that are available, and you can do that research. I like people coming prepared. If I'm going to be investing my time and money, potentially, I'd like them to know, one, what the company is, and again, LinkedIn is a fantastic tool for finding out who's connected to who and who knows who. And that leads to one of our points later about referrals. There's no excuse for not having a little book in front of you with all your notes drawn up of questions that you want to uncover, especially from a sales perspective. How have the sales team done? What numbers have they hit? Who's been successful? Who was the most successful salesperson in the last year, 2 years? What's the growth of the company? General, and again, I guess because I've been doing it for so long, but this should be sort of standard questionnaires that you're going into an interview with. Be prepared, and it really doesn't take that long. This is an initial interview. You're not going in to do a full singing, dancing PowerPoint presentation on how great you are. You're going in to build the rapport with your hiring manager before they escalate it. Do your research. Simple as that, really.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's that classic adage of, fail to prepare, prepare to fail. It's so, so important, but it's also for an interviewing perspective, preparation makes you feel more confident. It's going to help you
Mm,
in every single aspect of that interview. But the other thing in addition that I would add is just make sure that you've really researched and studied the job spec. I go
Yeah.
into lots of interviews where the candidate knows everything about the company, everything about me, everything about our origins, our growth, recent press releases, and that's great. But if they haven't really paid attention to the job spec itself and what those requirements are, and can then obviously give direct examples of why they would be suitable and why they should be, taken seriously for this role, then all of the research kind of falls short. So it's tying it in together. And all of the research that you do will just put you in a better position to understand what they're looking for in a candidate, how you'd fit well into the company, and it can really help you build that rapport right from the offset in a first interview, I would say.
yeah. How much research is too much research? Because I get a lot of questions on, should I be looking on Companies House? Should I know what Susie's pets' names are and stuff like this? So what's obviously I think you've mentioned the bare minimum there, but how far would you go with that?
I mean, to be honest with you, if I'm interviewing someone, I want to learn about them. Chances
Yeah.
are, if it's related to the company, I want to show that there is a keen interest there and that they're genuinely interested in learning about the company. However, I don't need someone to list off every single fact that they've learned. I don't think that would be a useful use of
Yeah.
time in an interview process. So I think having an understanding of the company and perhaps their origins and the current status is useful. But I think it's also every bit as useful to make sure that you also have researched and understand current news within that sector. So if
Mm,
we're talking about hospitality, for example, it's just, oh, so with the recent budget, how do you feel that that would impact you? And just showing that you have not only a clear interest in the company, but also in the sector and the product, and it all ties in together with your prior research.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say you don't need to start regurgitating the profit and loss from their forecasts, from their annual accounts. But yeah, exactly that. Understanding what some of their competitors are doing in the industry shows that you've got an interest in the sector that they're in. Is there too much you can have? No, is the answer. I don't think you can have too much understanding. Because again, you want to be comfortable with the conversation and you want to be able to ask questions. Another key element when you're interviewing, nearly all of us at the end of an interview, have you got any questions for me?
Yeah.
And the amount of times that you're talking to a salesperson or a senior executive and they go, no, that just sets my
Red
alarm
flag.
bells start going. Then I'm like,
Yeah.
well, hold on, come on.
Yeah.
You must have some questions, even if it's about what colour is my jumper I'm wearing. Whatever it is, I'm expecting a bit more of an engagement.
Yeah, it shows interest as well, doesn't it? So
Yeah,
just on that
yeah.
then, what obviously questions are depending on the role, etc. But what sort of good questions would you like to see in interviews?
From the interviewer or from the interviewee?
From the candidate. Let's say they've come
candidate.
in to interview you both. What sort of questions would really think, that's a smart question?
God, now I hadn't thought about that.
I don't know, in terms of questions, I always like questions from candidates about, describing the culture. How would you describe working for Serve, and I do think it's nice to add a personal element as well when you're asking questions. So, a candidate saying to me, what's your proudest achievements since starting at Serve? Or, what is your vision for 2025? Or just anything that basically engages you, I think is a good question. It doesn't have to be wacky, it doesn't have to be complex, but just something that shows that you have an interest in the hiring manager that is speaking to you, but also in the wider company, because it kind of shows that you have an interest in understanding if you'd fit in well. What's the culture like? What are you proud of? I think those sorts of things are quite good conversation continuers.
Yeah, that's a good point. Conversation continuers is a great way of summarising it, Susie. hopefully they would have already gone through the questions of, well, what's the numbers, how's the team made up, where's it positioned. But yeah, you're exactly right. To keep the conversation going, what's the ethic, when do people get in, how do the team celebrate wins together? Just build a conversation.
Yeah,
definitely,
rather than what's my start time.
Exactly. Yeah. What time's lunch? What time's lunch? Yeah. Let's not have those sort of questions.
Yeah.
Just on the back of what I just mentioned there as well. So salary, obviously, is a sort of a consultant my end. So we have conversations around salary, etc. Do you think mentioning or asking about the salary in the first stage interview is smart or a bit too straightforward? Because ideally they would know, right?
I mean, to be honest with you, I'd like to have a salary band stated prior to the interview so that the candidate knows what they're working with, because otherwise it's just unfair to have no idea. And I also don't think it is a particularly natural thing to be discussing during a first conversation. So I wouldn't want the candidate to feel awkward about it. So my kind of roundabout way would be to say I would expect the recruiter or whoever's speaking to the candidate to advise on that beforehand.
Yeah, and obviously we all interview a lot of sales professionals, right? Quite money driven, sort of hungry. Would you expect a first stage interview to ask about the OTE, what sort of the top performers are sort of billing at the moment?
That I'm more comfortable with, if that is something, just because it shows a clear striving for a goal, it gives someone an idea as to whether or not they can really overachieve in the role and what they would be able to potentially earn. So I'm comfortable with being asked that question.
Yeah, me too. So I would expect a salesperson to do that. But yeah, getting them in the door in the first place, I would have liked to have thought they'd have an idea what they're walking into to start. And if they can negotiate me up to the top level of the tier, fair play to them.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So we've just mentioned what's good about an interview and what we should be saying. So just not obviously flipping that on the side. How can I question this? Have you had any instances when you're interviewing candidates, you don't need specific names or companies, is there any interview you come out of and thought, oh God?
Of course.
So, what did they do that everybody here shouldn't do?
I was going to say, of course, but to be honest with you, it's one of these things where if you're interviewing remotely or you're interviewing in person, a lot of the things that are kind of red flags are the same. If somebody speaks 100 miles a minute and you can't keep up with anything they're saying, or they're talking far too loudly or way too slowly, those sorts of things just immediately distract from the content of the interview. Body language is really, really important. Kind of negative body language or closed body language isn't ideal. I think something that I also don't enjoy is if somebody is too full of criticism for their current or previous company or role, a kind of listing off of all the things that were wrong, that I never get that great of feeling from that. And the other thing is, I think it's really important not just to be able to talk about your strengths, but to be able to talk about your weaknesses or the things that you hope to develop and learn. I've had a few interviews where I've basically come out of it thinking that person has just told me that they're perfect at everything that they have ever tried their hand at, and they could effectively take over the world. And whilst confidence is great, you should be able to be a bit more introspective. So that's important for me. And then the other one, which is just number one, is eye contact. Try and make that connection. Once again, body language is really important.
I've got a classic, Dane. I'm not sure if I've ever told you this, but he turned up 15 minutes late with a coffee, and he blamed it on the fact that Starbucks was busy.
Good.
Yeah, don't do that. If you've got an interview for 10 o'clock, be there at 10 to 10. Just don't, and then expect to still have, if you do turn up 15 minutes late, still expect to have an interview. Timekeeping is just professional. Just, what the time is. Get there.
Yeah. Is coming to an interview too early a red flag as well? Because when I interview for Robertson Sumner and past,
what's too early, Dane?
I mean, I've had somebody turn up an hour before and waited in reception.
So I do think there is such a thing as too early, and I definitely think there's such a thing as too early when you're interviewing remotely. We're all busy. I'm in lots of meetings throughout the day. If I get that click up that says someone has entered a meeting 15 minutes early, it slightly panics me. I don't enjoy it.
Yeah, that's an hour is definitely a worry, because you're going to feel obliged to go down and at least offer them a drink or a tea or a coffee. That's taking an extra hour out of the interview schedule. That's 10 minutes. Again, that should give you enough time to get yourself composed if it's a face-to-face. Again, if it's a Zoom or a Teams call, then 5 minutes before, just to make sure your team's working. But if it's a face-to-face, get there 10 minutes early. Gives you a couple of minutes as well to get yourself calmed down, especially if you've been battling with the transport for London. Get yourself settled. I think 10 minutes is adequate. You don't have to go up to reception until five minutes before and let them know you're there. But just be there.
Yeah, makes sense. So how would you sort of describe a good close of an interview from a candidate's perspective? How would you like to be closed?
Well, we've probably all used it. Any objections or any reservations you've got about me? Again, I'm using a salesman's close. Is there any reason why you wouldn't take me to the next stage, or what is the next stage? I think as long as you've had that good dialogue and you've had the conversation going, people in our sort of positions, we're used to being asked, and I'm expecting people to ask me. Anything I've done wrong, any feedback you can give me, what would be the next stage? Will you be taking me forward? Be direct. I like that anyway. I agree.
I like that, and I like when people are seeking a timeline. It shows that they are interested and that they want to move ahead with the opportunity. So they're giving you their signals as well, just to know what that next step is. And I do think that it's only fair, where possible, to say to people, this is a 3-interview process. The next time you'll meet X, Y, and Z, and this will likely be in 2 weeks' time because so-and-so's on holiday. I think laying that out is a nice way to then end it. And then I do like a little bit of small talk. What are you up to for the rest of the day? Just end on a kind of friendly note.
Yeah, I think, because what you're doing there as well is you're assessing sales skills, aren't you? Right. I always sort of try and coach people that I work with into treat an interview as a bit of a sales process. Obviously, give an introduction, sort of find out what the role is really needing, sell your benefits and where you've done that experience before, and obviously close at the end. Have you ever had an experience where it's been too much of a close, like, let's stop now?
Yes, where someone has basically said, right, this is my calendar. You can let your colleague know that I'll be available. And I was like, no, that's not how it works. I'll feed back to the recruitment consultant, and then we'll go from there. And I'm all for being keen, but an insistence that you get the date right there and then isn't going to work for me. So there's a fine line. Definitely worth inquiring and getting an idea as to the timeline, but not pushing it.
Yeah, I agree. There is that a bit over keen. Yeah, I agree.
I mean, pulling up your calendar and trying to push that through. Yeah.
There's also that classic of like, right, okay, so just so that you know, my notice period is 3 months, so I could always resign tomorrow, and if I do, then I can start on this date. And you're thinking, maybe, but I need some time to gather my thoughts after the interview as to whether that's right. So I think just asking for next steps, asking for a vague timeline, asking, roughly who it is you'll be meeting and the next thing and the content of that interview, that is completely understandable. Beyond that, calm down.
Fine. So just before we move on to the networking side of your job search, I think everybody's hearing it in the markets, all pluses over LinkedIn, feedback. What's your sort of expectations on you both giving feedback to candidates? Is it depending on obviously your interview pipeline, I suppose? And I assume you both would sort of map that out and give specifics, but how often and how many days would you leave it until you give that individual feedback on whether they're successful or not?
I would definitely as part of that ending of the interview, the closing of the interview, I would say, you know, we actually have 6 candidates. That first round will end next week, so you can expect to hear back from us so that you can build in that expectation that it's not going to be tomorrow. In most instances, my preference is always to give feedback sooner rather than later, whether it's good or bad. You want to hear how it's gone and how you've done. But in instances where you are looking at a number of candidates, I think it's important just to manage expectations. So always feedback, but time scale is dependent on circumstance.
Yeah, a total agreement. As long as they know what the schedule is, you don't promise I'll give you feedback in 24 hours, because you're just going to tie yourself up in a knot. It's smart to get all your interview people out of the way and then give feedback. But as long as you tell them, you know, there's nothing worse than someone sitting there waiting for your phone call or your email to ping in, or the consultant. I mean, if you are using a consultant like yourself, Dane, I know you'd probably phone me after the interview anyway, and I'd probably give you a high level sort of feedback at that point. But I'd also tell you, could we please wait until
X1Z,
until Friday of next week, when all the rounds are finished. Then we can go back with a properly drawn out, documented, here's the feedback, reasons, and next steps if they've been successful.
Fine. What's both your stances on a follow-up from the candidate after the interview to you both direct? When I mean follow-up, I don't mean relentless chasing for feedback. I mean like maybe a polite no, or do you have a preference on that?
I don't mind that. I actually, you know, again, it shows a slight bit of interest. It feels like it's been done pretty much since the year dot. But I think it's nice just to say thank you for your time yesterday. Really appreciate it. Would you be open if I have any more questions that I've thought of since I've been away to come back and clarify with you? I think it builds on Susie's point. It's about building that relationship. They might not be right, but hey, you never know in the future, they might be right. So there's certainly no point. You don't want to burn bridges with anyone. The world's too small. The world's too small.
Yeah. So just nice, polite note afterwards. I mean, if somebody doesn't do that after an interview, does that weigh on your mind at all, or?
No. So I'm comfortable with them doing it, but equally I don't expect it. And it wouldn't, the right candidate is the right candidate. It wouldn't change that based on a short email to say thank you, if I'm honest.
Yeah. It doesn't. If we're talking about cover letters, oh my, that's a different story. I've had enough of cover letters. Please, let's not do that anymore.
Yeah, I always get that question. I think I mentioned it in the last sort of webinar. Not many people read cover letters anymore unless it's a C-suite sort of board level, something like that, right? It's more about that short, sharp CV. You then secure your interview and move on, sort of thing. So I know networking is becoming more and more popular. Obviously, with the likes of LinkedIn. I'm not sure how you can just say LinkedIn is networking. It's more of a social. But do you have any tips around how you've been successful in networking, and maybe how, I don't know if you've hired any salespeople in the past that have just randomly started networking with you. What's the best way to go about that?
I think approach with some sort of unique message or relevant piece of sector news, or something that is going to pique my interest, or hopefully pique whoever's interest I'm wanting to connect with. There are so many, it sounds rude, but bog standard messages that just say, hi, I see you're head of sales at Serve. I'd really like to connect. And I'm like, that doesn't tell me anything about you or why you want to connect. Are you looking for a job? Are you interested in finding out about the company? Are you a marketing firm? I honestly just don't understand why anyone would send that and then put any credence on it getting a response. I think you've just got to tailor it depending on who it is that you're speaking to. And what I always like is something a bit creative, or, as I say, something relevant to the sector, to the business. I don't know. If somebody messages me and says, oh, I heard that a name's a competitor is better than you because of X, Y, Z, I'm like, oh, right, no, right. It's like, and that will pique my interest. So yeah, just something quirky, really.
Yeah. The amount of LinkedIn Let's Connect, I've been following you and I'm very interested with your history.
It's a bit creepy, that, but
it is very creepy, very creepy.
Agreed.
But again, from a networking perspective, Dane, there are a lot of sector events held around the world, and a lot of them are free. Okay, you can attend some financial open events. That's a great place to network. Just turn up, listen to what's going on, build your knowledge about what's going on in the sector and the industry anyway. Hey, and I'll bet you 4 cups of coffee that since you're there, that you will meet someone in the industry that you can have a 5-minute conversation with, and then you can ask them, would it be okay if I linked in and connected with you to ask you some further questions? That's a great way of networking.
Yeah, and then following that up, saying, oh, we met at the expo yesterday. Yeah. Love chatting to you about whatever it is. Let's go from there. So absolutely agree. And yeah, loads of them are free.
Yeah. I'm not, you don't have to go and spend hundreds of pounds, thousands of pounds, some of them.
Thousands these days, isn't it?
Yeah. But you can get to some of the, like ICE, for example. There are events, maybe not of that size, but running weekly, especially at this time of year, around London, that you can get yourself registered on and turn up, and you can see some of the stands, some of the companies, and sit in and listen and listen to what's going on in that sector that you want to work in.
Yeah, interesting you mention expos. I know you both are very much in and out of loads of expos, right? But let's say, for example, Susie, you've got a stand at the Hospitality Tech. Would you mind a salesperson coming up to you and saying, look, I'm on the market at the moment, just wanted to learn a little bit more around you? Because I know it's quite ROI driven, aren't they? They're not cheap. So that might be taking you away from getting a lead from somewhere. I don't know what your thoughts is around that.
So they are ROI driven. It's all about the leads and who you can convert. However, you can do it in a kind of clever way. And I had actually a couple of people come up to me at the Hospitality Tech who basically were interested in seeing the system. So I was talking to them about system, the functionality, and then it happened that they dropped in that actually they work for a SaaS company within hospitality and they're looking at a new role, and they were really wowed because actually what Serve System could do with inventory management was far better than what they'd. So it started a conversation. I wasn't annoyed, I was interested because it was someone that clearly had not only just a general kind of clear interest, but they had knowledge in that particular kind of sphere. So no, I don't think I think it's just how you do it. If you come up and go, I'm looking for a job, how about it? Not the right approach, but it was that kind of engaging it that actually was, I think, pretty effective.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because you couldn't imagine actually walking up and saying, hey, Susie, I'm looking for a job. Can you help me? But on LinkedIn, that's your automated message, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny?
No, interesting. I mean, is there any other standout sort of networking that you've both done in the past that's been successful for you, or maybe if you hadn't had sort of positions right then that you thought, you know, actually, I remember that individual, I'm going to go reach out to them again?
Well, I was going to say in terms of kind of, so events wise, lots of the kind of, community events and lots of the things at the Excel where they have a number of different exhibitions within the same sector at the same time is really useful. But I also think it's important to cultivate a bit of a voice through your LinkedIn profile so that when someone does actually connect with you, they recognize that you are fairly active on there, not bombarding them with useless information, but if you do have some interesting insights to share, you're not simply reposting things without your own thoughts. But I always find if someone has, approached me at the show and then they add me and say, right, okay, let's connect. We met yesterday. I'll always have a look to see what they've been talking about, what they've been commenting on. It's interesting to get a bit of an understanding as to that person. So I do think if you are a job hunter, having some sort of LinkedIn voice can be really valuable and differentiate you from someone who perhaps doesn't.
Yeah. I'll just add in Susie, exactly. Just resharing and liking without adding comments. It's a bit bland. Have an opinion. Opinion. It's that gets people interested in talking and looking. That's more important.
If you say you had X candidate that's really, really strong, and you've got Y candidate, again, absolutely same strengths, but Y candidate is a lot more active on LinkedIn and you can see their personality a little bit more, would you point the way into offering that person rather than?
Not necessarily offering, because it would depend on the interview process, but I'd be more likely to be more interested in that person from the offshoot. Yes.
Yeah. It would certainly give me a lot more to drill into in the interview, the face-to-face, because as we know, there are certain individuals that are great sitting behind a keyboard, and their whole image is from that. And then when you meet them face-to-face, hey, guess what? They're a completely different person, shockingly different in some instances. But I think Susie's exactly right. You can't help but be steered by someone that is putting out lots of comments, as long as it's not AI generated, but lots of comments and interest. But like I say, even sometimes those individuals, when you get them face to face, that it's not the same person.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I know we as recruiters, we have a massive push on obviously CVs, what to do in interviews. Yes, LinkedIn's great, but I think also having that LinkedIn up to date, engaging, sort of showing what your interests are through there as well, mirroring your CV a little bit with a bit more personality. That's quite key then, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. That's usually forgotten about as well, especially as salespeople, especially the ones that are quite vocal on cold calling, etc. If you haven't got your LinkedIn up to date trying to apply for a job, it's that additional thing you might be missing out to stand out from the crowd. Fine. I think we've covered quite a bit there, from sort of CV writing. And again, if anybody wants that copy of the CV, drop me an email afterwards. But just to open the floor to a bit of a Q&A, really. So feel free, if anybody's got any questions, just to raise your hand and I'll pop your mic on. No question.
Cite the tumbleweed. Well, if they're not, can I ask a question, Dane?
Yeah, hopefully I'll have an answer.
ATS systems and
Sure.
CV formatting. Obviously, we're all aware that there are systems out there that review and segment and drop CVs. Have you got any feedback for everyone on the call about how a CV can really get through an ATS system to make sure it's landing up at the hiring manager's table or desk?
Yeah. No, sure. So I can give an insight to the back end of an ATS system. So, for example, if a internal sort of talent manager was looking for a certain sales skill, like anti-money laundering, for example, know your customer, they will type a lot of keywords into that. And what that ATS will do then is screen your CV. And if you've got no AML, no anti-money laundering, no KYC, no RegTech within that CV, it's usually going to slip through the net. So my advice would be is really have a think about the job description. If it mentions you need X, Y, and Z experience within selling SaaS or selling software, make sure that is definitely in your CV. Because you could also call SaaS and software solutions, which might be on the CV, but that might get missed. So I would say really sort of have a master copy of your CV and then tailor your CV to the job spec.
Yeah, I think that was Susie's point at the start of the call. Tailor the CV for the position you're going for. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I had a question here from Eduardo. It's a lengthy one, so bear with me. He mentioned he had a last stage interview more than 3 weeks ago. Initially had really good feedback. The interview was told it would get back to me a few days later and never did. I followed up them a couple of times and I was told 2 weeks ago they're having some delays and I would hear from them in a week's time. Never reached out. How should I follow up without looking too pushy?
Eduardo, I feel for you. That's incredibly frustrating and demoralizing. It's
rude.
And rude. But I would definitely just a gentle, it's been a while since I heard from you, just wanting to check in. You're just stating fact and you're just wanting to reconnect and see. Nothing really, really pushy, just hope all is okay. Where the hell is my response? Please, thank you. But yeah, definitely worth, because you want to show that you're still interested.
Yeah. I'm going to unmute you if that's okay, and we can just have a bit of a chat. So I've got a few questions around that as well. So a quick question from me, was that a direct hiring manager that you're chasing, or is it a talent executive or a recruiter? If you've got a mic.
Hi, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Spot on.
Yeah, it was directly with the hiring manager.
Okay.
I didn't apply through an agency or anything. It was directly with them.
Yeah, and they're just not getting back to you. I think what my advice would potentially be is as well, maybe check their LinkedIn profile. They might be at events, they might be at sort of hospitality, and they might be abroad at kickoffs, because I know there's quite a few sort of happening near the end of the year. There's a lot of traveling, so usually there could be an indication of that on their LinkedIn, and utilize that to your advantage. Say, look, I appreciate that you're at X, Y, and Z, and just politely just say, look, I'm really keen because of this and this. Do you think I'm going to hear back before Christmas? That could be an interesting avenue as well.
Or they don't work there anymore either.
Yeah.
I think Susie's right. Just be thoughtful and mention you thought it went very well. You're still very interested in the company. I think it's just rude not to respond either way. But yeah, you just be polite and ask the question. There's certainly.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, don't do it every day though. Don't. But I think you've certainly waited long enough to warrant getting some feedback.
Of course, right.
100% agree.
Yeah, and just from my perspective, a good question usually to ask as well, because this might prompt an answer, is I appreciate we're coming up to the end of the year. As your hiring priorities changed, do you think is this going to be something for the new year? And usually your answer is no, and then you can get a bit of a better answer.
Cool. Thank you so much. That's really helpful, guys.
No worries. I don't know if anybody else has any other questions at all.
There's a hand.
Bear with me, I'll take your mic. Hey, Alison, over to you.
Can you hear me okay? Yes, you can. Yeah, thank you very much for today. It's been really super helpful. I just wanted to go over the fact of the covering letter that you mentioned earlier about that's kind of a no-go. Because often when I'm finding for direct companies rather than recruiters, they are asking for covering letters. And I'm kind of trying to adapt it obviously to the job description, but I'm not sure if that's enough to get the impact of what I'm trying to put across.
That's a good question. Are you just applying online, or are you following up by another method as well?
Doing a little bit of the LinkedIn kind of try to connect as well, but it's that fine line of don't want to be seen too pushy to be following up much further. But then that's a really good question. Should I be kind of pursuing much more than I possibly am doing?
Good question. I don't know, guys, about the cover letters. Do you want
to? If someone's asking for a covering letter,
yeah, you got to do it.
You've got to do it. But I think my kind of advice would be similar to that of the CV. Just keep it concise and to the point, and align it with your skills and the skills that are required for that particular role. But yeah, I personally would keep it brief. I'd keep it a synopsis of kind of your career so far, and then something about maybe your goals and objectives, but ultimately no more than a short paragraph would be my advice.
Okay. Thank you.
and just going back to your approach, Alison, I don't know if Craig and Susie would agree here, but I always give the advice on use an application as a bit of a sales lead. So for example, you've applied for X, Y, and Z, maybe then go and seek out the hiring manager on LinkedIn and maybe just drop them a quick note, just saying, I've applied for this, and this, looking forward to hearing your thoughts. I appreciate, Craig and Susie, you might get hundreds of those, but I think that's a good way of just making yourself notice a little bit. So
it's your fault, Dane.
Yeah. I've got my IT telling me I've used up all my space on my Outlook. There's certainly no harm in doing that. It's you might not get a response, but you will certainly be on their radar, and they will start looking through the CVs. Again, the covering letter, because I know most systems now, when you apply direct, the companies ask for it. If it's going to the hiring manager, I'll put money on the fact the hiring manager doesn't read it, unless it's just hi, thank you, I'd like to apply for the position listed on XYZ. Here's a copy of my CV for your perusal. Susie, you can put a little bit more statement in the para. You certainly don't want to go any deeper on a covering letter.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Don't know if anybody else has any other questions. No, I think that's a wrap then. So hopefully that's really helpful. And if anyone, we do have another one. Richard, here we go. Richard. Oh. I've definitely unmuted you. Not sure what's happening there. But it doesn't look like your mic's working. So maybe the best thing to do is just drop me an email and I can pass that on. And hopefully I can.
His questions there, Dane. How important is direct industry experience? I've navigated several progressing to the final two on more than one occasion, only to be so sorry you don't have the relevant industry background. This despite calling it out as a qualification question during the interviews. Can you guys all see that question?
Just got that through. Interesting question.
I think that as a hiring manager, I think it's only fair that if you are going to not discriminate, but only go for someone with relevant industry background, then you set that from the offset as a requirement of the role. If you've got an interview and then that's stated, I just think that's a bit unfair. That's definitely not how I would operate. I think that there are circumstances where you don't specify that you need relevant industry background, but then you have 4 candidates and one of them has a wealth of industry knowledge and that sets them apart. And sadly, that does just sometimes happen. But I think that if the role job specification makes an even playing field, then I don't think that's a fair feedback personally.
Yeah, I think that again, Susie, just to use your statement earlier, research the job, and before you go to the interview, qualify. Is the fact that you are coming from this industry, but you're very keen to move into this industry, but you've got the talents and the skills that you've developed in said company you currently work at. Would that still keep the door open for me to come and interview? If they then say that after the interview, that's bad form, really.
Yeah, just obviously I get a lot of feedback from hiring managers, and the fact that you got through to final 2 on more than one occasion, and then that's just poor practice.
I agree.
So I wouldn't say that that's a you problem. I'd probably say that that's a business problem, that you've not received the proper feedback. Hopefully that's helpful. And what I would probably do on the back of that is try and push that a little bit.
Yeah, if you've got the transferable skills, a good hiring manager should see that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Perfect. Well, everybody, thank you all for joining. Hopefully that's super helpful. And if any questions do crop up afterwards, feel free to drop me a message, and I'm sure the guys are going to be happy to answer them. All right.
Indeed.
Craig,
Absolutely.
Susie, thank you very much for joining as well. It's an absolute pleasure on your Tuesday evenings.
Pleasure.
Speak to you later. Thanks.
Take care. Thank you
Cheers.
very much. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Bye.